morning, everyone. I am Peter Freer. I am founder and CEO of Play Attention. And I began my journey in neuroscience perhaps about 30 years ago when I had students who had attention problems and I couldn't change their world. So I began to study what NASA was doing. I was inspired by what NASA was doing to train astronauts to stay attentive in states of hyper and hypoarousal. And there is where Play Attention developed. And so today we're going to talk about the fact that neurotechnology can possibly make us smarter. And we'll see how this is done and how we can improve our lives using neurotechnology. So, perhaps one of the most astounding things I learned in these last 25 to 30 years about the brain is that every starlit sky that we've ever watched, every moonrise that we've ever watched, every sunset, every kiss that we've ever had, everything we've learned at school, everything gets reduced in the brain down to this. So the brain is an organ of reduction. It simply reduces all of our external inputs, right, our senses, down to the random firing of neurons in the brain. Yet we have no control over it, right? We just have no way to get inside the operations of our brain and have some type of control over it. Now, what neurotechnology lets us do is to have a direct insight into what's happening in the brain and lets us control it. And here's an analogy for you, right? When you are on your exercise cycle and you're holding the handlebars like this, many times you'll have a heart rate monitor telling you, how fast your heart is beating. If you're not beating fast enough, you're not working hard enough, therefore you can increase it because you have that feedback. You're able to look down at this control panel on the cycle right here, and you're able to see that your heart rate's too slow, you speed up. If it's too fast, we slow down. Now, we even have wearables that do that today that allow us to look at our heart rate and know what's happening on another organ that we typically cannot control. However, we can improve our fitness levels by being able to look at the rate and then increase it when necessary or decrease it if it gets too fast. But the brain, not until neurotechnology has been developed. So neuromonitors give us the control over our brains, and I'd like to discuss how this is possible, right? So you can think of it like a kind of a Fitbit for the mind, right? And that is what we're looking at as far as neuromonitors are concerned. How do they actually give us feedback or control over the way our brains function? The brain is comprised of billions of neurons. There are as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in our galaxy, a particularly odd coincidence. And these neurons are very, very, very small. They are contiguous, not continuous. In other words, they don't form a solid chain. They are slightly separated by this gap, this valley or cleft, what they call a synaptic cleft. In order to communicate with the cell next to it, then, one cell has to fire a neurotransmitter over to the cell next to it to talk to it, because that's how our brains function. They function over networks that are a lot like the internet, right? Let's take your cell phone for an example. And if you wanted to connect to another cell phone over the network, you dial a specific number, and then you're connected to the next cell phone on a cell network. And the brain pretty much works the same way. If you wanted to connect to a much larger network from your cell phone, then you simply hit Google. Then you're attached to an even wider network. Now, if all of this sounds amazingly simple and quite something that you fully understand, then you fully understand, or you at least on the surface will understand how the brain does this. It does it the same way. We don't have cell phones in our brain, but we do have the ability for a cell to communicate with another cell, which may be connected to a much larger network, and that's how the brain functions. Now, what happens in the way that neuro monitors work is that we are allowed to see when they communicate, when these cells communicate, they actually give off a signature, right? And in this case, you can look at the raw signature at the top. That's all of the data being poured from the brain. But then we're able to bring it down to certain levels that we fully understand in the brain. For example, if do you remember, anyone here remember, I hope you're old enough to remember, when we used to turn a dial on our radios? So if I wanted to listen to FM 105, I would turn the dial till it hit FM 105. If I wanted to listen to 104.5, I'd have to turn it back. And so the brain actually, we can look at brain waves, the activity of the neurons in the brain and the little bit of electricity they give off based on certain frequencies. Delta is a frequency. If it is dominant, you would be asleep. If you had alpha spindles in your delta wave, you would be in REM sleep. We would know that you are actually dreaming at that point. Theta, how many people here, quick question, how many people here would actually be able to, you've been in bed and you're trying to go to sleep and you've caught yourself falling. Even though you're in bed, you feel like you're falling and you snap out of it and you try to go back to get towards sleep. Now that would be a heavy theta state where you're daydreaming or in the pre-sleep mode. Alpha is dominant if you are awake and alert. And then you have beta 1 and beta 2 signals, which give you, which are dominant when you're processing a lot of information, when you're trying to solve a problem, or when you're engaged in speaking, those kinds of things. By the way, you can ask questions at any time. You should have a chat box that you see on your screen. Chat away. Feel free to ask questions. I will answer them at the end of the webinar. All right. So the delta, theta, alpha, beta waves give us a good idea of the state of the human associated with that, right? As I just said, this fellow's probably in a heavy delta dominant wave cycle. And if we see his eyes moving underneath his eyelids, then we know he's experiencing sleep, and that would be heavy delta with alpha spindles. So the idea is that monitors can look at what the brain is doing in real time and then give us feedback as to what we could do to improve that. In this case, we would want to monitor how well he was sleeping. So when he got up, we would know, would be able to give him a report saying, okay, you had good sleep up till about 2 a.m., at which time you had a lot of dreaming going on. That's how neuromonitors work, so that we can actually take a look at what the brain is doing in real time. So far, makes sense? If it doesn't make sense at one point or the other, feel free to throw in a question of something you don't understand. So when we monitor, we have passive monitoring, reactive monitoring, and active monitoring. And I'd like to go through each one of these with you so that you kind of understand what it does. The active monitoring is the one I'm particularly interested in when we're training the brain, but we'll talk about each one of these. Passive monitoring is a lot like stepping on your scale, your bathroom scale, right? We can step on the bathroom scale and it shows us a weight. That's very passive monitoring, isn't it? It shows us our weight. Does it do anything to change the weight? No. Can we do anything to change the weight after we step on the scale? Not really, unless we try to bounce on the scale and try to fool the scale or something like that. But essentially, it's very passive. It just gives us a number, we accept it, and then hope that it's going to be less the next time we step on it, right? So that's very passive monitoring. And if we're looking at that in the context of brain monitoring, the monitor would just be monitoring what you're doing and not tell you anything. It would just monitor your brain. And we do this in vehicle. I'm involved right now in a non-contact field of brain monitoring in vehicles, in cars. So we've developed a headrest. You can actually see the headrest right behind me. This is a prototype we use. And the headrest actually reads my brain as I'm driving. I don't know it's doing that, and there is no need for me to know until something happens. And that becomes reactive monitoring, all right? Not active, but reactive monitoring. Let me bring you up to that. Reactive monitoring at that point. So now the car, in the case of my headrest, since it would be passively monitoring my brain, perhaps I'm getting drowsy, and the monitor senses that. It becomes reactive because now it's going to give me a reaction. It's going to actually vibrate my seat and wake me up a little bit and put up an auditory warning on the console saying, you're drowsy. You need to wake up or get off the road. And believe it or not, we can actually do that now. All right. So we've moved from passive monitoring, where it's just listening to what my brain is doing, to making me respond to it a little bit to wake up. Right. That would be reactive monitoring. And then the next one I wanted to talk about would be active monitoring. And active monitoring is a type of neuromonitoring used to change human performance, human outcomes, human behaviors. And this is the very important one. And way back in the late 1980s, when I was developing Play Attention, I had a very unique idea, which I patented. And that would be that, because at that point, when people were looking at these brainwaves, and let me run back to these slides here so that you can actually see what I'm talking about again. People would look at these brainwaves and say, hey, if we change these brainwaves, then we can change this person. And I found that to be overly simplistic, because changing a brainwave does not ensure that I'm going to have better attention, better memory, better skills that I have to use. Changing brainwaves is changing brainwaves. It really does not necessarily correlate to significant outcomes. So I actually thought, you know what? I should create an active monitoring system where we actually place cognitive skill training in so that we can improve the executive function of human beings. And that created the genre in the late 80s called neurocognitive training. Neurocognitive training. So I actually developed that, initiated that, and then filed patents on it way back in, gosh, we issued those patents, I think, in the early 90s. But it's very important to understand how that works. And that would be an active monitoring situation that you see in Play Attention. Another way that we used it was for nuclear power operators. We still train Da Vinci robotic surgeons using it. And I'll discuss a little bit of this in the active monitoring sense as we move along here. So what happens during active monitoring is that we give people exercises, games, or sometimes they're in their real job working on it. We actually have programs where they could actually be working at a real task, and we are monitoring their brain activity in real time, videotaping them, and then we run their brain activity over the top of it. And that way we can see and help them later sit down with us, and then we talk to them about their performance and why they made specific decisions. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but let's describe what active monitoring actually is so that this begins to make a little more sense to you. We talk about forcing engagement, all right? Making the person actively engaged. So we know what engagement or active engagement looks like, and that's attention. When you're actively engaged and participating in an event, the mind becomes very quiet, very focused. You have a certain intensity to that focus. And there has to be a certain duration that is required so that we start to learn. The brain said, okay, hey, this new information is coming in, and I must engage with it long enough so that I can take this and make a long-term network out of it. All right? If you just look at something, you engage with it for a second or two, and then you leave it, it's not going to leave or initiate a lasting new neural network. We have to push or force the active engagement. It has to be intense, right? And it also has to have a specific duration to it in order to push someone into long-term change, all right? Again, if you're just fleeting in your attention, you pick up bits and pieces of things, but it makes no lasting change. If you're actively engaged, then the process begins. These are three critical catalysts that force brain changes. Then the brain is incredibly plastic. We call it neuroplastic. And in this sense, neuroplasticity really means moldable, malleable, or shapeable, right? So we can shape the brain. Kajal, the grandfather, the father, the great-grandfather of neuroscience, had a great saying. He said, any man, if he so desires, can sculpt his own brain. And there is a great truth to that. And that if we have the right tools, we can make significant change. Can we make ourselves smarter? You bet. Can we increase our performance? You bet. Can we change patterns that are negative to positive? Yes, absolutely. In order to do that, though, I have to have enough engagement from the person. So when we use active monitoring as a tool to make brain change, we want to use an algorithm that is an attention algorithm that makes them activate the exercise by being engaged. They have to be so engaged that the brain is going to trigger a new neural network for development. But aside from that first one, there has to be challenge, all right? There has to be challenge in the game that you're doing. If I let you do something you've done over and over and over again, you get on autopilot, you don't have to be that engaged. The intensity is just not there. However, if I challenge you a little bit during that exercise, I make you pay attention a little bit more, I make the exercise just a fraction more challenging to you, and it pushes you to the limits of your envelope, right, of how difficult this is for you. It's right on the edge of being too difficult, but I can still do it. I meet that challenge. If the brain is forced to meet that challenge while actively engaged, then we start that cycle of creating new neural networks. Now, once we have them challenged because we force the engagement, we provide the challenges in the games, then we provide a deliberate practice model. The deliberate practice model is different than just practice. If you're not familiar with the term deliberate practice, become very familiar with it. It's very, very sensible. I'll talk to you just a little bit about it right now. There is the father of the deliberate practice method was Anders Ericsson, a professor out of, I think, Central Florida University right now. Wrote many, many books right now on how people become experts, how people improve themselves, and how they separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Now, what he found is that people who did this actually used a deliberate practice model. If you watch people, and you may be one of those people too, that you have a skill that you like, right? Mine is martial arts. So I practice different skills in the martial arts. But typically when you get someone who has a particular skill, I see this among golfers all the time. Golfers go out and they'll take a bucket of balls to the range, and then they'll hit a bucket of balls, and then they go out and play, and they come back in and they're so dissatisfied with their game. They said, I hit a bucket of balls, I practiced, yet my game still stinks, it's awful. Well, that's because they're using a practice model. A practice model means that I just do the same thing over and over again. I practice it. And typically human beings, when we practice things, will practice those things that we're already good at because it satisfies us. If I'm a great tennis player and I have a great forehand, I'll practice my forehand over and over again because it's beautiful. It feeds my ego. I'm satisfied with it. I'm not so good in my backhand, so I kind of leave it alone. My backhand's not that good, so I just don't practice it that much, which is exactly the contraindicated mindset that you need. All right. You need to have the mindset saying, my backhand is really poor. What model do I use to improve my backhand in tennis? So deliberate practice would say, All right, let's go out and do the backhand, but let's set these little mini goals while I'm doing the backhand. So I get someone to feed me a ball, I hit the ball, and it sails too far. And my instructor said, you know what? That's cause is because you're not following through all the way. Let's practice follow through. So he gives me this deliberate goal, a very small goal that I can do. He sends a ball over and I follow through, and the ball flies off my racket and goes in the court beautifully with topspin. Then I go, oh, that's what I need to do. So let's practice these with, and I'll get at least 2 of them correct. So I practice it again. I get at least 2 correct. And then I set a goal, maybe I should do 3, and I get them all correct. I keep setting these little mini goals. And of course, my feedback is immediate because I can see where that ball is landing. That is a deliberate practice model. A practice model would be my coach just feeds me a ball, I hit the ball and I get mad, and I just hit the ball and get mad, and I hit the ball and get mad. But deliberate practice is to set little mini goals in there and get the immediate feedback on what's happening. So when you put all 3 of these elements together, we make them stay incredibly engaged while they're practicing these elements. We challenge them to put them to the limit of what they're able to do. We don't let them fail, but we put them right on the limit. Because if we don't challenge, remember the brain is not inspired to make a change. If we're challenged and it has to go beyond what it can do right now, what it knows, what it can do, then the brain will start accommodating us. And this is the wonderful thing about the human brain, is that it is plastic and it will accommodate challenge. As long as we have enough engagement to it, right? The intensity of attention, the duration of attention, it's challenge. And then at the end, if I set these little mini goals for myself, then I am getting this deliberate practice model in, where I set this overall goal, I need to improve my backhand kind of thing. And then I say, well, I'll try topspin and follow through. And there's my mini goal. And I said an even more of a mini goal in there, saying, oh, let me get at least 2 of these right so I can start to get it in my nervous system. And my brain accommodates me. And this is how we make change. Now, the neuro monitors really help all of this because they provide the first 2 for us. They provide the engagement because we run the attention algorithm, and then they actually allow us to challenge the person. Now, this is one of the play attention games called Time on Task. Now, this has got active monitoring in it. The goal here, the overall goal, is to move these boxes. Some are on the truck. They all start over here on the left in this little pile, right, of boxes, stack of boxes. When the person fully engages with this activity, they can actually drive that forklift over. And the goal is to take all of those boxes and stack them on the truck in a normal amount of time. And then this is all done by mind alone, by my engagement to it, using the neuro monitor. Now, once I take the boxes, move them all over to the truck, then I can get in the truck and drive it off all by my active engagement. So there's that active monitoring component that allows me to stay in the moment, to be very mindful, to be very engaged, and to accomplish this task. However, where does the challenge come in? Well, there is a challenge action in the engagement model. So the longer I play, the engagement model says, can you pay just a fraction more attention while you're doing this? Can you be a fraction more engaged? So there's some challenge to me right there. It forces me to pay just a little bit more attention, to become more intense. And then if I fail that, if I can't meet that, the algorithm is such that it takes you back to your last best state of attention, and then will push you again at a certain point to pay more attention. So you're constantly being challenged there. Now, during this, so that means the longer I play, the more I'm challenged to be engaged. Right? And this gives me a deliberate practice model, because overall what this is trying to get me to learn is that if I stay engaged, I can accomplish this task in a specific amount of time. Because this is a time on task activity. Time on task activity, that's the overall goal. How do I start a task, stay with it, and then close it within an ordinary amount of time? right? This is akin to having homework come home with your child. If your child is ADHD, you can have 15 or 20 minutes worth of homework. But if that child cannot engage, that homework becomes 2.5, 3 hours, and then a fight because you've had it. You're frustrated, they're frustrated. So we actually can teach this as a skill. Is this making sense? We can actually teach time on task as a skill, provided we give them the active monitoring, the challenge, right, and that deliberate practice model. I hope this is making sense to you as we go through. When we actually worked with Tufts University School of Medicine, and they asked us, so they actually came to us because they got a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. And when they originally came to Play Attention, they said, well, you know, we know you use the active engagement paradigm, the neuro component. We don't really think it's that effective. We think that brain training is brain training is brain training, and that really, it's really not important to have the neuro component. And this was an interesting development because I knew they were wrong, but they were going to be paid by the U.S. government to test Play Attention against brain games, very similar to those in a company called Lumosity. They used to advertise on TV all the time saying, we can make you sharper, we can help your focus, that kind of thing. And then they also tested us against this was a randomized controlled study. So they put Play Attention against brain games and then a group that got no intervention at all. So this is a brief outline of what happened during that study. There are actually 3 of these in peer-reviewed journals. Play Attention increased their executive function. The brain games, no. Their non-intervention group, no. Was attention increased in Play Attention? You bet. We had significant, now these are all significant increases. The brain games group, no increase in attention. In the non-intervention group, no increase. Behavioral control, our students greatly increased their ability to behave. Brain games group, none. Non-intervention group, no. Now, medication, no increase in medication. The Play Attention students were either off their meds after some of these tests, or they did not require any increase in medication. The brain game students required an increase in medication by an average of 9 milligrams. Same with the non-intervention group. They required an increase in their medication just to stay in school. Ours, no. So I think this is quite indicative of the fact that using the neuro component, neuro monitoring, can make significant differences. And this is a very difficult population. This is an ADHD population that we were dealing with. So if you are the typical neurotypical person, making brain changes may be a little bit quicker and a little bit simpler, but it's still neuro monitoring is an incredible tool to help you accomplish these things, right? So here are some of the benefits that we get from neuro monitors, that we can use it for attention, as I described to you just a moment ago, this active engagement. Meditation, you can learn to meditate with it because we can help you go to a meditative state. We actually have an application that is sold by Play Attention called Lotus, and it is a mindfulness meditation app for you. Relaxation apps to help you unwind. Cognitive load, we use this in the car many times that you're driving and you're trying to answer a call, you're trying to have a full conversation, you're trying to text, very bad. Texting and driving is actually more dangerous than drunk driving. Remember that. Do not text and drive. Foolish thing. Peak performance, we work with U.S. Athletes, Olympic athletes. We've worked with NASA astronauts and pilots in supersonic flight simulation training. Mindfulness as well, to be engaged in the moment. You know, that could be a big factor that you want to teach your students. We have programs for that. We use it for emotion detection now. We're working on those algorithms for the auto industry so we can detect when a driver is stressed, when there's road rage coming, whether they're satisfied in the automobile. Sleep as well. We now have well, let's put it this way. If monitoring your sleep, this is why there was a great company out a few years ago with a sleep monitor you could wear on your head. It was called Zeo. I think it was Zeo, Z-E-O. And they sold it for $99, and they thought they had a hit on their hands. And so when you go to sleep wearing the Zeo, you wake up and it would have on your cell phone or desktop information on how good or how bad your sleep was. Now, show of hands, obviously I can't see you, but you could put up your hand anyway if you know. How many people here realize when you get up the next morning that you've had a really poor night's sleep? I do. I don't need a monitor to tell me that. I got up. I had a terrible night's sleep last night. I ate too much, did not sleep well, had dreams all night. It was just awful. And so I'm one of those. I knew I had a bad night's sleep when I woke up this morning. I don't need a monitor. If neuro monitors don't provide solutions, then their value diminishes significantly. All right. So when we're looking at sleep down in the lower left-hand corner, I know when I've had a poor night's sleep. I don't need a monitor to just tell me that. Can a monitor help me go to sleep? That would be a huge benefit. And so we've created apps over in my other company called Freer Logic. And we create apps that help you go to sleep, much like you're doing right now during my webinar. You're just starting to nod off. But we have apps that will help you go to sleep, that put you in a pre-sleep state. We have the Sleepy series, Sleepy Beach, Sleepy City, Sleepy Country, and we have a product called Meditation that helps you learn to go to sleep using neuromonitors to coach you along. So just knowing that you have a problem, that's like stepping on the scale in the bathroom, right? I look on that scale in the bathroom, I looked on it this morning, I go, you know, you could lose 30 pounds easily, and you should lose 30 pounds. That's fine, that's passive monitoring. It doesn't do much for me. But if you use active neuromonitoring, right, then we have the ability to help me do those things, to help me go to sleep. We also look at distraction in vehicle as well. When a person is not paying attention to the road, they're looking away. We actually help people with that in the vehicles through monitors as well. You notice this goldfish here on the right. And this is something that's quite interesting. Just a couple of years ago, Microsoft did a study on human attention, and they performed it in Canada, and they examined the attention spans of Canadians. And this is, I'm mentioning it just because it was done in Canada. You can bet it is exactly the same here. A Canadian measures about 7 seconds of intense duration on attention, to be actively engaged, and then they're off to something else. A goldfish has 9 seconds of attention. So human beings at this point in our culture, in our history, have very, very short attention spans. A goldfish has 9 seconds, we average 7 seconds. If you look at the data, the correlation of the advent of cell phone use, digital use in cell phones going up, you can see the reverse correlation of our attention spans going down. All right, this is an odd fact. So can neuromonitors, can technology reverse that cycle? Because we know that if we have very short attention spans, we're not going to be very intelligent people. Right? It's very difficult to have a very fleeting attention span and know a lot about anything. All right, so we need to be able to reverse this process. Can neuromonitors do it? You bet. Do we do that in play attention? Yes. Are we going to do it in automobiles as well through the headrest that you see here? Absolutely. And these are the folks we've worked with, right? Olympic teams, NASA astronauts, NASCAR, Da Vinci robotic surgeons, nuclear power operators. I'm actually co-author of a white paper on human performance with the International Atomic Energy Agency out of the United Nations, where we got to go in and work with them on applications for this. We created a nuclear power station, a virtual nuclear power station, that they could move an avatar around in by mind alone, by being in an active, engaged state, so that they could learn to solve problems under duress and stay actively engaged, even though things were getting quite exciting in the system. So, and Da Vinci robotic surgeons, they're using it now so that they can train the students to be able to do the surgery as well as their professors at university in a very short amount of time, because they're actively engaged and participating. Can neurotech make you smarter? That's the question. Can it make you smarter? Absolutely. So can it make you smarter? Yes. Can it help you improve your physical performance? Yes. Can it help you go to sleep? Yes. Can it change your lives significantly? The answer is yes. Will we become Einstein? No. Will it take us to the limits of our capabilities that we're genetically disposed? Yes. Absolutely. That is the benefits of neuromonitoring. If you like, you can actually call that number, the 800-788-6786, to learn more about the Play Attention program. I want to also be able to answer your questions right now, if there are any. So if you have not seen it, you have a chat panel, and we actually had some chatters come in and actually ask questions. So if my staff would help me by inputting, making certain I get those. All right, Shruti asks, can neurotechnology create changes in the emotional responses to situations? Absolutely. You know, this is a big factor. Emotional, especially, let me give you a good example. If we have ADHD children, very commonly, emotional outbursts are accompany an ADHD child. They don't have the regulation internally to stay calm under certain situations. So can we actually change those response patterns using neurotechnology? We do that particularly in Play Attention because we offer challenge, and it gets to a point sometimes where the students want to become emotionally charged and get very mad, and then we teach them strategies during the games how not to do that. So absolutely, the neurotechnology sets the basis, and we can absolutely change emotional responses. She also asks, can we train young minds to be significantly different from the way their parents are wired? To a limit, right? There are limits as to what genetically we're disposed to doing, but we can change patterns that you want to change. That is the neuroplasticity of the brain, and incredibly important to know when we are living our lives. We can shape ourselves. We can, if we want to, we obviously can shape our bodies physically by hard work and exercise, but we have the same opportunity using neurotechnology to do this with our brains. She says, I don't mean I want my kid to have similar emotional outbursts like me, and can I train them to be a different person? Yeah, absolutely you can. Absolutely. And you could train yourself if you wanted to. Ron asks, are the changes lasting? Oh, that's a good question. The changes are lasting. The changes that we make, as long as we practice them long enough, are lasting changes, long-term changes. They don't go away. As a matter of fact, in the TOUGH study that was done on ADHD children in the Boston schools, went back 6 months after they had done the Play Attention training, just to see, does this all disappear or does it remain? They went back 6 months after stopping everything to see if there was some type of perseverance, whether they carried on those great attributes, behavior, increase in behavior, increase in executive function, etc. And the answer was yes, they certainly did. They persevered. They actually had all the changes even after 6 months with no training, because they were trained long enough to do it. Robin asks, how many sessions does it usually take to improve a child with ADHD's self-regulation? That's a really good question as well. It depends on the individual. Every individual learns differently. We say an average of about 40 hours. Some do it far sooner. Some do it after a little bit longer. So it really depends on the human being. I'd love to give you a number. This is the number, but it doesn't happen like that. happens basically on an individual basis. And we just measure all the way along to see if they've got it and they've mastered these skills. And then they can graduate from the program. So they don't have to do it forever. Good question. All right, from Alex, do the skills learned get transferred to real world situations? Absolutely. But you have to use a technique. Like we have in Play Attention, we have a tool called the academic bridge. So we want them to do real homework that they get from school while they're doing the academic bridge, because the academic bridge makes them engage to the real world homework. So transference and generalization are occurring because of the tools that are provided. Good questions. Robin asks again, how many minutes are the sessions for the child? The sessions, we ask to get in at least an hour per week, but it doesn't have to be done at one time. If you wanted to do 15 minutes today, 15 minutes on Sunday, 15 minutes on Tuesday, over the course of a week, you wanted to break it down into 10, 20, 30-minute sessions, you could do that. So just enough to accommodate your schedule at home, because I know it's hectic. I mean, we all live hectic lifestyles anymore, I think. So you can use it, we'd suggest at least an hour a week. You could go longer, but at least an hour, and then break the sessions up. And when you get Play Attention, you'll get an advisor who will coach you on how to make that happen for your child or yourself, how to schedule so that you're comfortable and it's going to work for you. All right, David, Shruti asks, we are creating more dependence on a gadget. Isn't the real world human interaction way more different than two-way? All right, way more different than two-way. We are creating more dependence on a gadget. I wouldn't call neurotechnology a gadget, all right? You're actually monitoring function, just as you would be if you are on your elliptical trainer, your jogging platform at home, your Peloton. You need feedback in order to make change. Shruti, you hear that? You need immediate engagement and feedback. Now, you can try all your life. We have people who meditate all their lives and get nowhere, because you could say, all right, I'm going to meditate. And then once you're into meditation and being mindful, and then you catch yourself thinking about bills that you have to pay, that vacation you had last year, friends you have to talk to, and then you go, oh, geez, I just spent 5 minutes doing that. Now I'll try to meditate again. So this gadget, let's not call it a gadget, Shruti. If you want to take it seriously, it's a tool. It's a tool that can change your life. If you treat it as a toy or a gadget, probably won't be very effective for you. But if you treat it as a tool, then the benefits are there for you, and they make things a lot easier for you to learn to change. That's a really good question, though. Laura asks, can children and adults use Play Attention? I need it for myself and my child. Absolutely. Adults, we've worked with many, many adults and many children, so absolutely. Bala asks, which is more effective, home program or clinic visits? It just depends on what your relationship is with your child. If you are looking to visit a center, that may be more successful. If you have a good relationship with your child where you're not fighting and they'll work with you and we can teach you how to do that, you can do it home as well. It depends on the family, the interaction, the dynamics of the family. So I wish I had one answer for everybody, but I don't. The answer is it depends on your dynamics with your child. If your dynamics are good, we have many, many, many thousands and thousands of people that do it at home. Robin asks, what people use this program? For example, kids with ADHD, head injuries, stroke victims, etc. Oh, good question. Yeah, we use it because these injuries are also related to the same types of things that have happened to ADHD kids. In other words, if we have TBI, traumatic brain injury, then we lose our ability to remember. Our short-term memory, working memory becomes very weak many times. And then we have reductions in our cognitive functions and executive function. So we actually work on those things so it becomes a viable, very valuable tool So we do use it with stroke victims. We have used it with them and had significant success in recovering. One of my friends who is a professor at Texas A&M, I'm going to leave his name out of it, has used it with his wife. She's made a full recovery. ADHD, obviously, we're the leader in this field. No one else surpasses us. Head injuries, TBI, stroke victims, those kinds of things, autism, you can make significant gains. But it's because of the basis of the tool. Dean asks, is it hard to learn how to use Play Attention? Is there support? We give you a full-on tutorial, so you know exactly what you're doing. You get about an hour, hour and a half tutorial, so that we walk you through everything that you need to do. So you know what you're doing. You become the coach. Is there support? You're given support every step of the way. It's lifetime support. So you have a question, you call, you email, you text, we answer the question. And try to find that. And it's ongoing, and it's included in the price of the program. As long as you're using the program, you don't pay for support. You don't pay a call-in number or something like that. You just call in, and we'll guide you through each step of the way. And that's all included in Play Attention. Bala said, do the different programs come standard with a program? There are, I think, 6 core games in Play Attention, and they come with it, and then there's an add-on suite. So if you have other problems other than what's addressed in the 6 core, and you go, oh, I need this on motor skills, or I need something on social skills, that kind of thing, then you can select just like an a la carte menu from the extra programs. So, wow, so great questions. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? I'll just give a second. All right. In education school, they often type, oh, YK asks, which type of setting would be more beneficial individually or group setting to practice? Oh, individual or group setting to practice is what YK wants to know. You can do either one. We have an iLab version so that you can actually use it with a lab full of students. You have a master monitor so you can see what each one is doing. You can actually have video chat with them just like we're doing right now. You can have text chat with them. You can have this, and they wear headphones. You have this private conversation going on. So we have that as well. Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate you being here and asking great questions. Abala said, so you have one for social skills? Yes, we do. We have a program for social skills because that's a weak area for a lot of people to learn how to respond to social cues, sounds, social sounds, that kind of thing. Robin also asked, is this done online or on your own computer? You do it on your own home computer, right? It's not done online. It's done on your home computer from the privacy of your own home. Good questions. Well, again, I thank you, and I hope this made sense to you and how it's used and how we actually can use it as a viable tool. So I think, I hope we got that across. It's been my pleasure. If you have any other questions, just call back and call that number right there, and we'd be delighted to help you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. It's been my pleasure. Again, I'm Peter Freer, founder and CEO of Play Attention. Take care.